Welcome back to the channel. I'm Colin and this is the review of the NF Acous NM25. It's a single dynamic driver IEM that retails for $199. The NM25 belongs to the brand's professional series, which means that they are primarily tuned towards being a monitoring IEM. The NM25 has an all-aluminum shell and a very capable dynamic driver that is able to reproduce frequencies from 9 Hz to 40 kHz. NF Acous has also done a lot of work acoustically inside the shell, like adding some dampening materials and optimizing the airflow. Here's the specs of the NM25. Now let's talk about the unboxing experience and I'll tell you how it sounds. Just like the NA20 I reviewed previously, NF Acous pays a lot of attention to their packaging. After removing the outer sleeve, the inner box opens like a book. On the right, we have the NM25 itself, inside a CD-shaped protection foam piece. Then we have a set of 4 tips underneath and the 5N silver-plated OFC cable. On the left, we have some documentation and a zippered case. Inside the zippered case, there's a 1/4-inch adapter included. Now onto the build of the NM25. According to NF Acous, the shell was milled out of a solid block of aluminum. The faceplate has a nicely decorated polished bevel. Edges are really well defined and crisp. The logo and the markings are all engraved into the shell. There are 2 visible vents on the shell, one just below the cable connector and one between the driver and the nozzle. The NM25 has a QDC style 2-pin cable. It's a 5N silver-plated OFC cable. It has a mini jack end plug. Personally, I think the cable is a bit tangly and the ear hook bends a bit too much for my liking, but perhaps it can be fixed with a hair dryer. Otherwise, the connectors and the guitar pick style splitter looks really nice. Comfort-wise, isolation is average with the stock tips, since the stock tips are quite shallow and it's a dynamic driver IEM. You get a little bit of driver flex when wearing these. Okay, let's check out the measurements of the NM25 with its stock tips. Looking at the graph, it's apparent that the NM25 will be a brighter IEM with the upper range and treble boost 2 kHz and above. The bass shelf of the NM25 slopes down really smoothly. There's a slight boost in the bass, especially in the mid-bass region. You can see that the mid-bass slopes down very linearly instead of having a scoop like the Harman curve. The sub-bass rolls off a tiny bit on the NM25, which is pretty typical for single dynamic drivers. The lower mid-range area is slightly scooped, which should give you a less warm but cleaner mid-range presentation with more separation. The upper mid-range rises following the Harman curve, but there's quite a big peak at the 2 to 3K region to increase perceived detail and clarity. The treble region seems to be quite peaky beyond the 4K region, which should result in brighter airy sounds and making the IEM sound brighter as a whole. Let's talk about the sound quality. The NM25 is quite a bright and airy IEM. It's V-shaped and has a quite vivid sound. You can hear a lot of airiness and spatial notes with the tuning. A lot of studio-use IEMs have a boosted upper mid-range and treble region to enhance detail perception. And this is also what we can see in the NM25. Personally, I do think the aluminum shells do impact the sound too, giving it a more crisp and metallic sound. That said, the treble can be and will be too much for some people, especially depending on what kind of music you put through it. Personally, I do not prefer it for modern rap and EDM music. Though there is a lot of texture in the vocals and the sound, I find the snare and the sibilants just a bit too lively for my preference. However, for music like some jazzy stuff and classical stuff, the treble translates to very good airiness instead of harshness, which I enjoy. You can clearly hear those higher notes diminish while lingering in the air. There's a sense of fluidity and coherency in the treble, where it's rarely found in treble produced in a hybrid IEM. If you plan to use these for music production and monitoring, I think the treble boost will help pick up nuances or flaws in tracks more easily. The mids of the NM25 is pretty neutral. I couldn't hear obvious signs of coloration. Vocals are slightly recessed, though there is good airiness to it and it's very detailed. Female vocals sound good, but I think deeper male vocals lack a bit of body. Chris Stapleton's voice, for example, sounds slightly thinner than usual on the NM25. Instruments sound natural yet detailed. There's a nice smoothness and airiness to the instruments. I really enjoy electric guitar on these. There's a sense of smoothness to the sound, yet it's able to maintain a lot of micro details. There's a slight bass boost on the NM25 as seen in the measurements earlier. I think the bass on the NM25 is very satisfying. It's not the type that comes and goes super fast, but it's the type that hits deep and lingers for a split second before it goes away. In terms of clarity and texture, the bass might not be the most resolving, but it has bass that's simply satisfying and pleasing for my preference. The soundstage of the NM25 is quite wide, with decent depth. The size and presentation is pretty good, especially considering the NM25 being a single dynamic driver IEM. Soundstage and imaging isn't its strongest point by nature. It lags slightly behind some tribrid or hybrid IEMs around this price point in terms of soundstage depth. Imaging though, I think the NM25 performs really well. It's very accurate and the positioning is very precise. That's quite surprising for a single dynamic driver. The imaging is much more accurate than the ear acoustic SPA high-end Max. So this brings us to the comparison against the SPA high-end Max. Similarly, both of these have an all-metal shell and a single dynamic driver, though the SPA is about $100 more. Comparing the two, the first thing that stood out to me was the mid-bass of the SPA. It hits much harder than the NM25. The SPA also sounded warmer, and vocals are more forward. On the other hand, upper mid-range details like sounds from a guitar strum was much more apparent on the NM25. The soundstage is also wider and has more precision in the imaging of the NM25. Then I compared the NM25 to the Kiwi Ears Ether, a single planar driver IEM. The two actually have a very similar frequency response up to the 2K region, but how they each sound is actually quite distinctive. It's still very apparent that the NM25 is a brighter IEM overall. The NM25 for some reason sounds faster than the Ether, which is not what you expect from a dynamic driver. The Ether feels warmer, more natural, and more coherent. The details don't jump out in your face, but I think when you listen closely, there's more micro details in the Ether. While the NM25, you can immediately notice nuances when it's apparent in the recording. Now for the cons for me on the NM25 is that the treble region is a little fatiguing in some genres, especially for casual listening. It might be a pro for you if you actually use them for studio use though, or if you're a treble head. Second, I wish the passive isolation is a bit better, though it might just be the tips as the stock tips are quite shallow. It would also be great if NF Acous included another set of tips. In summary, I think the NM25 is a very capable single dynamic driver IEM for those who prefer a bright sounding IEM. It has great detail retrieval that amplifies a lot of minute details in tracks, and its imaging capabilities are really quite good for a single driver IEM. So if you love a brighter IEM or need one for monitoring, be sure to check out the NF Acous NM25. So this is the end of the review. Please let me know if you have any questions about the NM25. If you enjoyed this video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Thank you for watching.